We can now bring in Avi Hyman, spokesperson for the Israeli government, who joins us from Jerusalem. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, we've had these reports that the U.S. has paused some weapon shipments to Israel. This as concerns, of course, grow off that looming offensive in Rafah. Is the Israeli Prime Minister willing to risk this steadfast support he's been getting from Washington so far?
So, as you just reported, the President of the United States has said that his support for Israel, America's support for Israel, is ironclad. Now, I'm not going to comment on reports of unnamed sources. I have nothing to add on that. What I will say is that Israel will plow on with the missions of this war, as stated from day one, to destroy Hamas, to bring home the hostages, and to ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. Those war aims, we stand shoulder to shoulder on those war aims with the American administration.
The support has been steadfast so far, you're right. But shortly, the Biden administration is going to come out with a report on whether Israel has violated U.S. and international law during this operation in Gaza. Once those findings come out, whatever they may be, is there a fear where you are that U.S. aid will come with strings attached now?
We are in the midst of a war for our very existence. We're fighting a genocidal terrorist organization that stated quite clearly that they will do October 7th again and again and again if given the chance. We won't give them the chance. In the meantime, Iran and its proxies that surround us from every direction are watching, are seeing if they can smell blood in the water because they seek our absolute demise. We will do everything in our power to safeguard the future of the one and only Jewish state. And we will stand shoulder to shoulder in that mission with the American administration.
I want to ask you about a possible ceasefire agreement, because on Monday, hours after parts of Rafah received that evacuation notice from the IDF, we had Hamas that said it accepted a ceasefire proposal. Israel said that that ceasefire proposal was agreed to or brokered by Egypt and Qatar. What was wrong with that proposal?
So we definitely saw that Hamas announced that they had accepted something. The only problem is it takes two to tango. They apparently accepted some kind of an agreement that we didn't agree to.
But did the US agree to it? Or did the US say Israel would have agreed to it?
That is unclear to me. What I can tell you is that our lines have been quite clear. I'm not going to negotiate for the release of the hostages over the media. But what I will say is my prime minister has been quite clear. We will not agree to an agreement that says that there has to be a permanent ceasefire, which would leave Hamas in power, which would enable Hamas to take over the Gaza Strip, and ultimately would enable Hamas to do what they want to do, which is October 7th again and again and again. What we will do is what we've done in the past. We will keep up the military pressure. We will explore all military and diplomatic options available to us, and we will do our utmost to bring home the hostages. We have our team in Cairo now trying to make a deal, and at the same time,
but this is a low-level team, from what I understand from media reports. So, can they really take decisions, or do they need to come back and get the blessing of the war cabinet?
This is a team that was sent by our prime minister with the explicit instruction to do what they could do to bring home the hostages. Now, Hamas needs to come to the table and negotiate in good faith through the mediators, because enough is enough. They are holding 132 Israeli hostages against their will, men, women, children, and a baby, a crime against humanity. You know, this war could end right now, today, as we've said from the beginning. This war could end right now if Hamas put their hands in the air, waved the white flag, unconditionally
Avi, they have accepted a ceasefire. You've told me what you're not willing to accept. What are you willing to accept then?
Well, I just told you I would accept them unequivocally surrendering and releasing the hostages. And also, we already achieved a deal with them in the past. I won't be negotiating any future deals in the media. I can say that that will happen behind closed doors, and I hope, for the sake of the families and for the sake of the people involved, that they are reunited with their family as soon as humanly possible.
The CIA director is meeting the Israeli Prime Minister. What can you tell us about that meeting?
It is a meeting among friends, among close allies. It is a meeting being held behind closed doors at a time when we are fighting for our very existence.
Is it one
Um,
that could apply pressure on Israel to accept a deal?
I think there's been conversations throughout the war between us and the American administration on all levels, and this is a continuation of those conversations. And if there is any news to be made from that meeting, I'm sure it will be released together with the Americans.
You mentioned that there are 130 Israeli hostages that remain in Gaza. Won't a potential incursion into Rafah, an offensive into Rafah, put those 130 hostages at risk?
It's 132
132.
hostages. And what puts them at risk and what has put them at risk from the very beginning of this war is Hamas, who pulled them out of their homes, some of them in their pajamas, from their bedrooms, from their kitchens, babies, children, and forced them into captivity, we know are raping them, men, women, children, who are abusing them, who are giving them a lack of food and water and even oxygen in underground tunnels. They need to be released. The world needs to stand strong and say, bring them home.
You say you care about the hostages. I understand that. That is one of your stated objectives in this war. But families of hostages, I have spoken and interviewed a Franco-Israeli woman. She lost her mother. She lost her niece. Her two children were abducted. Her ex-husband was abducted. Her ex-husband remains in Gaza. She was able to get back her children. She too says the only way to stop this war is through a ceasefire. Why aren't you listening to hostage families?
So you must understand that Israel is a tiny, tiny country. There isn't a single Israeli that I know of that isn't connected in some way to someone who's been killed in this conflict or who's been taken hostage. I myself know many people that were killed in this conflict. And my friend, Rabbi Doron Peretz's son, Daniel, is still being held in Gaza as a hostage. He was killed on October 7th. Now, there are families that say that there needs to be an immediate deal. There are families that say that the only way to release them is through military pressure. But at the end of the day, the prime minister has the hardest decision to make of all. He is leading the country. He was democratically elected. And together with his government and his negotiation team, we will work out the best way to bring home the hostages as soon as humanly possible.
Avi, Israel says it wants to launch a limited scope operation in Rafah. What does this mean exactly?
I can't comment directly to ongoing operational activities. I'm sure you can understand that we have troops on the ground, and I don't want to endanger them. The IDF has said that this is a limited operation in East Rafah at the moment, and we will see how that unfolds.
Can you confirm the Kerem Shalom border crossing is open?
To my knowledge, the most recent announcement by Kogat, which is the section of the army that is responsible for distribution of aid into Gaza, has said that it is open. There are currently trucks, lorries being processed to go into Gaza. I'll remind your listeners that your viewers that this is the second time we had to close the Kerem Shalom crossing, the main artery of aid into Gaza, after Hamas fired at it. This is the second time in recent days, and the first time they killed 4 of our soldiers, 4 soldiers that were just trying to get aid through to help the people of Gaza. Hamas couldn't give 2 hoots about the people of Gaza. They just want to stay in power.
But what about the Rafah border crossing? From what I understand, that is closed. That also is a much-needed lifeline to get aid into Gaza.
Yeah, well, the majority comes through Kerem Shalom, has done for some time. These are 2 that you just described, Kerem Shalom and Rafah, are 2 of 9 entry points of aid into Gaza. And we will continue to do our utmost to get as much aid in as possible. There's actually, to our knowledge, a surplus of aid. And I would ask international organizations that are responsible on the ground to not leave a surplus of aid on the Gazan side of the fence, but to distribute it. There was never an issue of getting aid into Gaza, but rather getting aid around Gaza before Hamas and their ilk steal it. Now, you're right that we've taken temporary control over the Gazan side of the Rafah crossing, and that will actually help to ensure that Hamas doesn't steal the aid, as they've been doing from the very beginning of the war. They were waiting on the Gazan side of Rafah, and they were stealing the aid. They were hogging it down in their underground world of tunnels, 2 times the size of the London Underground. And sometimes, when they felt like it, they were selling it at a mass premium to the people that were supposed to be getting that aid for free.
I want to talk about aid in a second, but I want to ask you about this potential operation of Rafah because this war has gone on for over 7 months now. We have seen close to 35,000 people killed. Even the Pentagon admits that a vast majority are women and children. If you go into Rafah, the civilian casualty is going to mount exponentially.
Well, I'm not sure the mathematical equation that you're using to ascertain the future or to predict the future. What I can tell you is the IDF goes out of its way to avoid civilian casualties, has done from the beginning of the war, and will continue to. In fact, military experts like John Spencer, who is head of urban warfare at
But
West Point in
but
America,
even
has
the United States is clearly worried about civilian casualties going up. That's why they've halted this shipment of aid, haven't they?
no, no. Let me be very, very clear. Okay, Israel is very concerned about civilian casualties. Always has and always will be. We were concerned when 1,200 Israelis were brutally murdered on October 7th in cold blood, and we're equally very concerned when accidentally, in the fog of war, civilians are accidentally killed. Those aren't the same thing, but we're worried about both of those things, and we will do our utmost to avoid both of them. But I would reject what you just said about those reports that I've categorically said I can't confirm.
Avi, we've seen demonstrations taking place across college campuses in the United States, here in France, around Europe as well. If Israel does launch this full-scale offensive in Rafah, its isolation on the world stage will only get worse.
Well, you're asking about two things. Firstly, the pro-Hamas protests that we're seeing in America and around the world. Those are very worrying when supposedly educated,
they're not
supposedly,
pro-Hamas.
well, they,
I personally covered a demonstration here in Paris outside the Pantheon last week, and these are people who don't want to see another 35,000 mainly civilians killed. These are young, educated, informed students.
well, I'll reject the Hamas figures that you just gave me, and I'll ask you, do they say things in French maybe,
No, they were
like
speaking in
from the,
English as well.
okay, were they saying things like from the river to the sea,
No,
Palestine
I
will be
didn't hear
free?
that.
Okay, because
And I covered
that's
it for
obviously a
hours
Hamas.
last week.
Okay, because obviously that's a Hamas point. If they're calling for a ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power, is that pro-Hamas or anti-Hamas? Okay, so I would say that these protests are very worrying, especially those that call for the genocide of my people, especially those that support Hamas, and they're very, very worrying. Now, as far as the international community, we will ask free democracies like ours to stand with us in our fight, because this is a fight for Western civilization. This is a fight against Hamas that seeks the destruction of the Jewish state and the demise of Jews everywhere. That's not my words, that's the words of their charter. And they are backed, sponsored terrorist organization backed by the Iranian regime that says first they will come for us and then they will come for you. So it's very simple which side of history one should be on today, and that is firmly on the side of Israel.
Avi Hyman, thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you.
In other news, authorities in Kyiv